There's a fly in my room. I can't seem to kill it. Hello! Today we're going to talk about drafting or writing your research introductions. So, at this point, you should already have a working title. Remember, it's very hard to proceed to our research introduction if you don't already have, your working titles. So, writing the research introduction is quite simple in that it only expands on the things that you put in your TPMs or your title presentation matrices. By expanding on these ideas, we create more or we add more information, some information that was recommended to you by the panel in your title presentation, or some information that you newly discovered when you started researching more about your titles and topics. So let's go on to what are the parts of the research introduction. Also note that introduction is the I in the IMRAD, the format that we're using. So this is very much the first chapter or the first part of your research paper. So let's look at the parts, let's look at what is a research introduction. A research introduction is the opening section of a research paper that provides context, explains the significance of the research, and outlines the paper's structure. So, much like in a standard essay, there should be a part wherein the reader is familiarized with the topic and the problems in the paper. What are the things that are going to be introduced in the paper? So, we need an introduction to essentially lay down the foundations of what the reader should expect in the paper. Let's focus on a few parts of this definition. So it provides one, context. So we give context in a sense of we should explain what the problem is. If there are any new terms, we should define them. If there are any specific types of concept that we need to define, we should define those as well. That way, the reader will go into the study knowing everything that he or she can with the about the topic at hand. Next is it explains the significance of the research. The significance of the research can come about in a few ways. So the first the main is there is a part called the significance of the study, and of course it in the background of the study, wherein it explains what gaps you're trying to close, or what is what are the objectives of this study. And of course, it outlines the paper structure. We're going to give a little bit of a preview on how the paper will be conducted, how the study rather will be conducted. Next, it aims to guide the reader from a broad subject area to a specific topic of the study. So, of course, when they look at their title, it's not going to be super specific. That's why we put all of the background information in the introduction. So what are the parts of a research introduction? Here in UNITA Christian Colleges, we use the standardized format of an IMRAD paper. The IMRAD paper, or the I in IMRAD paper, is the introduction, and it contains these subparts or subsections. We have the background of the study, the literature review, the synthesis, the statement of the problem, the thesis statement, the significance of the study, the scope and delimitations, and the theoretical framework. Some of these parts may already be familiar to you kasi ginamit nyo na po sila nung kayo ay gumawa ng title presentation matrix. So, nung ginamit nyo po yung title presentation matrix nyo na yon, ibig sabihin, meron na kayong familiarity on how you should craft your background of the study, or a very short part of it at least. So, today we're going to go part by part and look at what should be included in each of these subsections para po makita natin kung paano talaga isulat ng maayos ang isang research introduction. So, let's go and start our lesson. So, for this lesson, we are going to use a sample title. So, the effects of smartphone use on high school students' sleep patterns and academic performance in STEM subjects. So, let's look at the first part, which is, or the first subsection, which is the background of the study. So, the background of the study introduces the topic. It is the very first part of the study that the readers get to read. Okay? So, it gives a background of the study and a little bit of a literature review. This is where most of the evidence will appear in your paper. When I say most of the evidence, because we are trying to establish the existence of a problem, the rationale of a problem. So rationale is essentially answering why the problem exists and why we need to study it. We need to give solid and concrete evidence. So we usually see the background of the study has numerous or several citations from different papers. Alam ko na marami sa inyo during your title presentations were told to add more evidence or to add more literature review within their background of the study. And that's because the background of the study serves as the not really a foundation, but the introduction itself. Okay, this is the part where you are established. Dito natin pinapatunayan na ay okay, may problema pala talaga na kailangan aralin. Ito yung dahilan kung bakit kailangan aralin yung problema na yun. So, kailangan po talaga clear sa ating reader by the end of reading the background of the study that this is the problem and this is what we intend to study about that problem. Okay? So, let's look at a sample background of the study. This part of the study, okay, like I said, establishes the problem. So, ano ba yung mga bagay na dapat laman nito? So, dito sa ating sample, makikita natin na may multiple paragraphs, okay? And each paragraph focuses on a specific thing. So, to help you understand what should be written in the background of the study, or to help you understand it more, I have created this checklist. So, we have the background of the study, or BOS checklist. So, the first is that it introduces the general topic. Let's look at it. So, sabi doon, what that means is we opened with the broad context of the issue. So, in our sample, we have smartphones in daily student life. Okay? So, if we go back to our sample, yan. So, we have sort of the context of that, or how smartphones are being used. Next is, it cites credible academic sources. So, we have examples here such as Levinson et al. In 2017. So, you use journal articles and scholarly sources. Okay? So, excuse me. So, those are going to be crucial to your paper. Yun nga lagi ko sinasabi, kailangan meron kayong evidence. You should always have enough evidence for your topic that it really does exist, because this is the part where we prove that it exists. Next is, it critically discusses past findings. So, it goes beyond summary. It compares and contrasts findings. So, we see that in the example before, where it mentions conflicting evidence and gaps, and it notes them properly, meaning that these conflicting evidence and gaps and contradicting results in past studies are noted properly and mentioned and discussed in our background of the study, therefore giving way for us to address these gaps in our own research. Next, it identifies specific gaps. So, it points out past studies did not address. Okay? So, some past studies, because no study is going to look at 100% of a population or 100% of a problem, because that will take too much time. And many studies, because they are done in an academic setting, they have a limited time span. So, what we're going to do is, we're going to look for gaps that other studies did not address, and we're going to focus on those gaps. So here in our sample, it says lack of a focus on STEM-specific outcomes. So again, that is clearly mentioned in our study or in our sample. Next, it connects to a present study. Closely shows how the current study, your study, builds on or fills our gaps. So, hindi sapat na pinakita mo lang, no, ito yung kakulangan ng iba, 'di ba? Oh, ito yung kakulangan ng iba, okay na 'yan. Okay? So, ang kailangan yung gawin po is, ito yung gaps, ito yung mga hindi na-discuss ng iba, and this is what we're going to do to address those gaps, to build or fill in those gaps. Okay? So, we need to we need to discuss that as well. Hindi pwedeng ipo-point out lang natin yung kulang ng iba, tapos, okay na yan, sige. And understood na kami na yung mag-fill in ng gap na yun. You also have to end your background of the study with a statement of purpose. So usually this begins with here in our sample. This begins with this study addresses this gap by etc. 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 So makikita po natin dito na ina-address niya directly yung mga gaps na yon at sinasabi niya kung paano nila i-fill out. Okay? And last, of course, lagi naman po throughout our entire paper, we're going to use an academic tone in our writing, no. So if it's a little too personal, you have to be more academic with it. So that's our background of the study. Again, this is the part where we establish the existence and the importance of studying this problem. So kailangan po talaga na, again, meron tayong enough evidence at sundin po natin yung mga nakalagay na content dito sa ating checklist. Okay? Now, let's look at our next part. So, our next part is the literature review, which you may be familiar with. Why my mouse isn't moving anymore? Which you may be familiar with because we ourselves created our literature review matrix in the past. Okay, I think it was lesson 3. So, the literature review is a comprehensive survey of scholarly sources. Hindi naman po siya nagbago, no? But in the context of our paper, it is no longer going to be presented as a matrix or created as a matrix. It's going to be created in a paragraph form because it's going to follow the format of the paper. So, this is what it's going to look like. So, of course, we have our checklist. Okay? So, our checklist, now, it's a little bit shorter. Of course, we need to look at it like, we need to use only like the most essential parts of a literature review. So that in our checklist, of course, I always say this, you need to use credible sources. Okay? So, lagi po natin sinasabi, again, kung wala pong kung wala po yung mga author at hindi po natin alam kung sino sumulat, automatic po hindi po natin siya considered as a credible source. Okay? Yan po. So, it cites recent relevant journals. Next, it groups related studies. So, here, we can see in each paragraph, although the paragraphs are short, if you look at how the things that are being cited, or if you look at how things are being discussed, they do group the similar ideas together. So that's a good way of of discussing or creating your literature review. Next is our it shows agreement or contradictions. Again, since there should be no biases in academic writing, it's crucial that we show different sides of an argument or show different sides of a topic. That way, we can get the best ideas on what we're trying to find out, on what we're trying to resolve in this topic. Okay? Next, of course, It identifies the gaps. Paulit-ulit na lang tayo, ma'am, lagi na yung paulit-ulit ng gaps. Because that gap is what you're trying to fill. So, you should always discuss it properly. Okay? And of course, hindi po dapat mawawala ito. It links back to the study's focus. Okay? It ends by showing how present study fits in, or it ends by showing how you, as the current researcher, will study or will fill in the gaps that you found in the literature review. So that is it. Okay, so the synthesis is not discussed here because we were already discussed it in our past lesson. So essentially, just as feedback, this is what a synthesis does. Okay, so it links back to the study's focus. Okay, so that's the synthesis part of our background of the study, or our research introduction rather. Sorry. So next po, ayan. So we have our statement of the problem. Another part of the TPM, or title presentation matrix, that we looked at, or that we use. So we have our general and specific questions and variables that we wish to answer towards the end of the paper. So here it is. It's quite simple. So of course, this is the statement of the problem. Ayan. So this is the first part, which is our sort of our stem, or our paragraph giving our general topic. Ayan po. And then we have our research questions. So research questions here: how frequently do high school students use smartphones during nighttime? What are the main purposes? And what is the relationship between nighttime smartphone use and students' sleep duration and quality? So again, these are just sample. I'm not necessarily saying that these are going to be the research questions that you're going to use. So of course, we have our checklist. Okay? Ano po ba yung mga kailangan kasama? Or paano po ba natin isusulat ang ating statement of the problem in an effective way so that it is clear to the readers, to the panels, and to you researchers on what you're going to do. Okay? So first, align to the problem. Each question directly addresses the main problem you described. Okay? So ang tip dito, avoid random or unrelated questions. Okay. So because it is the first time for a lot of you to do research, marami pa kaming nakikita noon na, for example, you're trying to look at perceptions, and then your statement of the problem suddenly focuses on experiences. So perceptions and experiences are two different things. So kailangan po lagi nating babalikan, ano ba yung gusto nating aralin? Okay, ano ba yung problem natin para ma-align natin sila properly with our study. Okay? So, yung questions natin, hindi pwedeng kung ano-anong matanong lang basta nandun yung topic natin. Next, the question should be clear and specific. Kailangan, naiintindihan po natin, or naiintindihan na reader, ano talaga yung gusto nating malaman. Okay? So, avoid using vague words like etc. and so on. Okay? So, if you're enumerating things that you want to find out in your research questions, you should be specific on the things that you are enumerating. Huwag na kayong gumamit ng etc. Because that is vague. That's too broad. Malay ba namin kung isa o 1,000,000 yung kasama doon sa etc. na yon. Next, it is feasible to answer. Each question can realistically be answered by your design's time frame and resources. Okay? So that's what I was told. A lot of the topics or titles that I have encountered throughout the years, they always look at long-term. Okay? Or not always, but sometimes they look at what are the long-term effects. The thing about long-term effects is that from the word itself, it will take a long time for us to get these results. And that is not time that we have. Wala po tayong ganung long-term kasi can be anywhere from 6 months to 1 year to 10 years. So these effects cannot be cannot be studied within the span of time that we have within this school year. So, kailangan po feasible, okay? We talked about this. So, sa research questions, kailangan din natin gamitin yung acronym na SMART. Okay? Ganyan. Kailangan i-narrow down natin. Next, use appropriate question words. Start with how, what, why, to what extent, is there a difference, what relationship exists. So, ayan, may mga ganyan tayo. So, yan. Avoid yes or no questions. Use open-ended phrasing. Okay? I see this all the time. Sometimes there are yes or no questions. Okay? So, kailangan po iwasan po natin yun. Next, logical sequence. Arrange in order that makes sense from general to specific, from easiest to hardest. So, for example, if we're looking at certain relationships between two variables, uunahin po natin muna yung questions about the different variables, and then saka natin ititignan yung complex question of how one variable relates to another. Next, it matches the research purpose. It matches the research purpose. Questions clearly show how you will reach your research aim or goal, and keep these relevant. Okay? Match the research purpose. Siyempre, kung ano yung gusto nyong aralin, dapat yun din yung mga questions na lumalabas sa inyong statement of the problem. Next, limited in number, usually 2 to 5 major questions. Too many will give you an unfocused paper. Tandaan, we are looking at quality over quantity. It is what you're asking, not how much you are asking. Dito nga po, masyado pang marami yung 5. Here in UCC, we encourage to limit it to 3 research questions only. Okay? Kasi kapag 5 na, ang dami nyo na masyadong aaralin. So, 2 to 5, okay? Minimum of 2, maximum of 5. Next is no overlap. Kailangan po yung mga questions natin, iba-iba sila. Do not ask the same questions in different words. Sometimes, student ask, for example, in what ways do smartphones affect students' sleep? And then their second question is, how do smartphones affect students' sleep? So, di ba parang same lang yon in what ways and how. So, parehas lang siya paano. Sa anong paraan at paano. So, parang, di ba same? Hindi lang parang, same talaga siya. So, try to avoid those types of questionings or do not use those types of questionings. Just combine them, decide what wording you'd like to use, and then start or create a new one. Okay? Next. Ayan. So, sa statement of the problem, nagtanong tayo. Sa thesis statement, magsasagot tayo. Hindi natin sasagutin yung ating research questions. Ibig sabihin, gagawa lang po tayo ng assumptions. In a scientific research, this is more or less known as our hypothesis. So, because we are not all of you are using the scientific method in your research, you're going to talk about it like assumption. So, assumption po ang tawag sa thesis statement. Okay? Sa ating context, no? So, eto po siya. Ayan. This study aims to determine the relationship between high school students. Ayan. Tapos, eto yung mga assumed answers natin. Etong mga assumptions na to, eto po ay may basis pa rin, okay? These are hypotheses, so they need to be educated guesses. Ibig sabihin, kapag educated guess, meron po kayong prior knowledge. Eto ang basis po ng mga sagot na ito ay yung mga naaral nyo sa mga past studies na nilikom nyo nung kayo'y gumagawa ng literature review. Wala lang citation kasi itong mga to ay answers nyo na mismo. Okay? So, you don't have to explain the basis of your answers or your assumptions. All you have to do is look at them. So, if you look at our research questions in the past, okay, these are our research questions, and these are the assumptions. So, we can look at you can match. If there are 3 research questions, there should also be 3 assumptions. Okay? Or 3 assumed answers. Now, very, very simple lang po ang ating assumptions or thesis statement. Una, clear statement of intent. Okay? So, here is the problem. In the statement of the problem, we stated the problem. In the thesis statement, we stated how what will the study do and why. Next, directly linked to our research questions. Mentions the key variables, for example, smartphone use, sleep, and STEM. Next, it's short and precise. 1 to 2 sentences. Nakita natin yan dito. You don't need to give paragraphs upon paragraphs of your assumption. Okay? Next, it states your assumptions. It lists beliefs that must hold true for the study to be feasible. And lastly, okay, ito yung pinaka-importante, logical and realistic assumptions. Okay? So, logical and realistic assumptions meaning you're only focusing on realistic assumptions. Ano ba? Kaya nga siya educated guess kasi you've looked at past studies. The past studies have shown this. Ibig sabihin, that's going to be they're going to be similar study results to your study. Just remember that in the statement of the problem, or in the thesis statement rather, kung ano lang yung tanong, yun lang yung sasagutin ninyo. Okay? Don't create new questions because of the absurdity or the unrealistic nature of your answers. Okay? Yeah. Next is significance of the study. So we're in the home stretch. Malapit na po tayo matapos. The significance of the study highlights why research is worth conducting. Bakit ba kailangan nating i-conduct itong research na to? Sino ba ang makikinabang? Okay? So, dito po yan. Ganyan. Of course, hindi laging ang tip ko sa inyo, may lagi na kayong freebie na isa, ang future researchers. It's not going to always look like this, mainly because a lot of studies don't focus on the schools, no? So, ito yung mga stakeholders ng schools. So, alamin nyo kung sino yung stakeholders ng community na i-study ninyo. Sino yung mga aapektuhan, sino yung mga matutulungan kapag binasa nila yung study ninyo. Hindi dahil matutulungan sila ng study ninyo directly, pero matutulungan sila kapag binasa nila yung study ninyo. Ano yung mag-gain nila doon? Of course, future researchers, like I said, sila na yung laging libre. Ayan. Of course, we have our clear beneficiaries, list who will benefit. Next, it's the specific benefits. Explain how each group will benefit. Not just that they will. Hindi pa din sabihin na natin, the students will benefit. The study will help students understand how their nighttime phone habits may affect their sleep patterns and their performance in STEM subjects. Okay? So, yan po ang benefit. Diba? Siyempre, kailangan i-explain natin kung paano rin sila mag-benefit by being more aware of these effects. Yan. Okay? So, yun po. Next, relevance to the problem. The benefit connects directly to the to the topic/problem of the research. Next, they have practical value. Benefits are realistic and show how findings can be used or applied. Ayan. So, alam na natin na may application naman talaga yung findings. So, i-explain din natin dun sa mga kung paano siya ma-apply for that specific beneficiary. Next, it is concise and direct. Okay? Use clear, short statements for each group. Kung mapapansin niyo po dito sa ating sample, 1 to 2 sentences per beneficiary. You don't have to explain it in paragraphs upon paragraphs. We need to be concise. Next, logical order. Groups are arranged logically. Students first, then teachers, then institutions, then our future researchers. Now, lagi pong nahuhuli si future researchers. Okay? Ngayon, ito po ay logical order because who will benefit from most to least po ang benefit po, ang nagbe-benefit. Next, no overlap. Each benefit is distinct and not repetitive. If there are 2 or more groups being benefited in the same way, you can just put them in the same bullet or they can have their own paragraph. Parehas lang yung benefit ng parents tsaka teachers. For example lang pagsamahin na lang sila, parents and teachers, tapos i-explain yung benefit nila. Okay? Next is an academic tone. Again, lagi-lagi po natin sinasabi, within an academic paper, we use an academic tone. So, yun po ang significance of the study. Again, meron na kayong laging isang libre, yung future researchers. Next, ayan. And the last part, or second to the last part, is our scope and delimitations. The scope and delimitations essentially defines the limitation or defines the boundaries and parameters of the study. Ibig sabihin po, dito po natin makikita kung hanggang saan, sino lang, at kailan lang tayo mag-i-study. Okay? So, ayan. So, this is the scope. And this is the limitations. Okay? So, sometimes it is bulleted like this, and most of the time, it is in paragraph form. It really depends on you as a writer and what your research advisor will recommend for you to do. So, the study will examine how often. So, it really gives us, who is going to be involved, where it's going to happen, what is included in the study, how the study, ano yung method. It gives us a little bit of a preview on the method that we're going to use, because that's important as well. We are setting the limitation that, this is the only method that we are going to use. Hindi po kami gagamit ng ibang method. Ayan. Ito rin yung mga exclusions natin. Ayan. So, again, the scope and limitations, ito po yung mga parts na kailangan kasama. First, we have a clear scope. It states exactly what the study covers. Next, location and population. It describes the who and where. Okay, importante po yun. Next, time frame. It indicates the time period covered. So, in this case, we have an entire school year or the current school year and semester. Next, methods and tools. May briefly mention the tools that we're going to use. So, we have surveys and records. Of course, in qualitative research, we're not going to use surveys, but we're going to use either interviews or observations. Next, it has clear delimitations. What is intentionally excluded or limited in our study? Kailangan po not well explained, but well defined po ano yung hindi natin isasama. And lastly, it has possible limitations. May mention factors that limit generalizability. That was a struggle. Self-report honesty. So, kailangan din po maging honest tayo na since we are limited to these parameters, the study may not, yun. So, a single tool of specific time frame. Therefore, results may not be generalizable to all students, schools, or regions. Okay? So, this is also a good way for future researchers to parang magiging magandang tool yan para sa future researchers na masabi na, okay, may gap na. Kasi sila na mismo yung nagsabi ng kanilang pagkukulang. Okay? So, yun po. Again, wala naman po kasing study na lahat ay maisasama natin. Okay. Okay. So, we are on our last part. So, this is the theoretical framework. Not going to sugarcoat it. Minsan, ang theoretical framework po ang pinakamahirap na part na gawin para sa isang research introduction. Mainly because we don't know what theory or what it does for our paper. A theoretical framework is a foundational structure for research, providing a conceptual model that guides the study and links it to existing knowledge. Ibig sabihin, kapag yung theoretical framework nyo na-link nyo to, yung study nyo na-link nyo to a theoretical framework, it is now linked to all of the other studies that have used this theoretical framework before, giving you and your study the credibility or the foundation that it needs, and the concepts that you can now use in studying it, in your conceptual framework, and things like that. So, dito po sa sample natin, gumamit tayo ng ginamit po natin ang uses and gratification theory. Okay? So, it explains how individuals actively choose media to satisfy specific needs. Etong UGT, ayan. So, you can pause the video to read it now. Okay? So, essentially, there are a few parts to a theoretical framework. But, you need to, in this sample, we use two theoretical theories for a theoretical framework, which you could do. That is totally possible. But, you have to be very very careful in explaining it well and connecting it to your study. That is what the last paragraph is for. Hindi po basta-basta na magbibigay lang kayo ng theory. Kailangan po i-connect nyo siya sa study ninyo. Okay? Kasi kung nagbigay lang kayo ng theory, ayan yung theory. Anong gagawin ko dyan? 'Di ba? Anong gagawin niyo dyan? So, kailangan po, meron kayong explanation of how the theory will now help or will now guide your study. So, basahin natin yung ating last paragraph. By combining UGT and CLT, this framework provides a basis for understanding the behaviors, smartphone use, and their impact on students' sleep and STEM performance. These theories help explain the expected relationships between the study's variables and guide the formulation of research questions, data collection, and interpretation of results. Importante po yan, yung interpretation of results. Kasi sa theory kayo pwedeng mag-anchor Pwede nyo sabihin, ay tama yung theory na ito. Kasi yung results namin, ganito, nagmamatch. Okay? So, makikita po natin dito yung connection. Ito po yung usually nakikita naming nawawala kapag kami po ay nag-check ng papers. Well-explained si theory, well-explained yung kanyang premise at kanyang concepts. Pero ang problema, hindi po nila kinoconnect si theory sa study, hindi nila ina-explain kung ano yung importance at bakit yun yung theory na pinili nila. Okay? So, importante po dyan yung connection. And as you can see here, it's not very long. It takes about 2 to 3 sentences to connect your study to the theory and your theory to the study. Okay? So, of course, meron tayong checklist. Mawawala ba yan? Ayan. So, it states your theories clearly. Of course, nakita naman po natin doon. It was named and cited. It explains each theory. Again, 1 paragraph for each theory. Ngayon, kung isa lang po yung theory ninyo, edi isang paragraph lang po para lang ma-explain siya. It connects theory to study variables. Ayan na yung sinasabi ko. Kailangan merong connection between the theory and your study. In this case, they connected to the variables, they connected to the problem itself. Next, justifies the choice. I-explain natin kung bakit yun yung theory by using or explaining why it is relevant to our study. Okay? So, yung relevance, again, that connection and that relevance, it's very important. Next, logical flow. The discussion is organized and easy to structure. And lastly, we use proper citation. Hindi kayo yung gumawa ng theory na yan. Therefore, kailangan nyo po silang, yung proponent ng theory ay kailangan nyong i-cite properly. Okay? So, yun po. Yun ang ating theoretical framework. Yan. So, that is our lesson on writing a research introduction. I hope that you learned something. If you have any questions, you can write them in the comments down below. Or if you see me next time face-to-face, pwede nyo po akong tanungin. So, you don't have to write, if I'm not mistaken, you don't have to write your research introductions right away or at this moment. We'll do that in our second quarter. So, please, try to study these guidelines so that we can be familiar with how to write the research introduction before we actually are sent out to write them. Okay? So, maraming salamat po sa panonood. I'll see you when I see you. Goodbye!